Mothkeepers, the build that has been on the brink of greatness, but never quite there. Well, all that changes today. Let's get into it. With the exotic gauntlets Mothkeeper's Wraps, your grenade becomes a cage of 2 loyal moths. These can either be offensive arc moths that will explode on contact, dealing damage and blinding enemies, or they can be defensive void moths that will fly to the nearest ally, giving them a 22.5 hit point overshield. And this also gives you 2 grenade charges to work with. The way this works is you can create moths based on enemies or nearby allies. If you throw it into a group of enemies, 2 arc moths will spawn, whereas if you throw it only near allies, 2 void moths will spawn. And if there's both allies and enemies close enough, 1 arc and 1 void moth will spawn. Knowing this allows us to use our moths how we want. Need some instant health and safety? Throw it at your feet. Or if you have a group of enemies spawning, throw it at them to wipe them out and blind any remaining enemies. And this build becomes really strong when paired with the right weapon, that being the exotic grenade launcher Exterius. This hive grenade launcher shoots ammo from its reserves, and as you deal damage with it starts to build up an enraged meter, allowing you to shoot it even faster. While it does decent damage, the real magic comes from its perk, Loyal Moths, stating that final blows and rapid direct hits will spawn an arc moth, and when you pair that with the Mothkeeper's Wraps, this will also spawn a void moth, adding in another layer of survivability. If you haven't tried this build out this season, I'd highly recommend giving it a go, since Exterius got a pretty major buff, increasing its direct damage, ammo reserves, and reducing the moth cooldown to 3 seconds. So let's dive into the build and break down how it works. For our super, Tether is the main option that I like running, which will offer you a 30% weaken for DPS phases, and a ton of ad control for activities like Onslaught. This isn't a key part of the build though, so run whichever super that you want. As for the abilities, I'm bringing Gambler's Dodge. That way we can dodge near enemies to get back another charge for our melee. And for the melee, I'm bringing Snare Bomb. My goal with this melee is to use it enough to proc this season's artifact perk, Power from Pain, and gain Devour from rapid kills on weakened targets. Devour will help with survivability, but will also feed back into our grenade for more grenade energy. And for that grenade, you can take any of them, since the cooldown will be overwritten to 73 seconds for those moth cages. As for the aspects, the first aspect I went for was Stylish Executioner. Now, killing enemies affected by any elemental debuff will make you invisible, since we'll be constantly blinding targets with arc moths and weakening targets with our melee will constantly be dipping in and out of invisibility. So the second aspect that I'm taking is Gunpowder Gamble. Now, any kills will start working up stacks for your Gunpowder Gamble, and at 6 stacks, you gain an ignition on a stick that can be thrown to wipe out a group of enemies and deal some pretty good damage to tougher targets. If you're not a fan of this aspect, you can take Winter Shroud for the extra class ability regen, or Threaded Spectre if you want to create decoys. I decided to go for a full offensive role, which is why I picked Gunpowder Gamble. As for the fragments, the first fragment I'm taking is Facet of Ruin. This gives an increased range to our Gunpowder Gamble, and since there are so many other people running stasis right now, any of the shatter damage that we cause will have increased range and damage. And next, I'm taking Facet of Protection, so that while surrounded, you gain an extra 15% damage resistance, which is generically good for overall survivability. Then I take Facet of Balance, so that rapid light-based kills will give 10% melee energy, and rapid darkness-based kills will give 10% grenade energy. Then I like to take a combo of Facet of Awakening and Facet of Honor. With Facet of Awakening, rapid kills will create an elemental pickup based on the type of damage that was dealt. This build mainly uses arc damage, so we can create the incredibly strong Ionic Traces to feed us a ton of ability energy. And then with Facet of Honor, you gain Transcendent energy whenever you interact with an elemental pickup. This can really help build up your darkness meter by picking up or destroying tangles, or this season, picking up all of those stasis shards that your teammates will be creating. So what does this look like in action? Well, I'd like to save around 1 charge of my grenade as a backup option in case I'm in trouble. That way I can throw it at my feet to gain some instant void overshield. Then you can use your melee to weaken a group of enemies and start rapidly killing them to hopefully proc Devour. If you don't get enough kills, you can use your dodge to gain another melee charge and try again. Once Devour is active, you can now use your grenades more freely, and you can use Exterius a ton to deal pretty good damage, but mainly keep generating both arc and void moths for void overshield and blinding enemies. And every time you get back your gunpowder gamble, throw it at a group of enemies to wipe them out, or deal a ton of damage to tougher targets, and even stun unstoppable champs. And don't forget, this season, grenade launchers can stun overload champs, so you intrinsically gain the ability to stun 2 separate champions with this build. So let's talk about ways to improve the build. First up, for the stats, I like to aim for 100 resilience and 100 discipline to gain the most amount of survivability and grenade energy as possible. Then I like to go for a split of strength and intellect, with any leftover stats going into mobility. As for the armor mods, for our helmet, I first like to take an arc siphon mod to help create a ton of orbs and consistently gain back more ability energy from our later mods. Then I bring a special ammo finder to help generate more overall special ammo, allowing us to use Exterius more often. And if you have room for it, Ashes to Assets is really helpful to gain back more super energy from grenade kills. And as for the gauntlets, I'm taking firepower so that grenade kills will create orbs. And then I like to pair that with bolstering detonation so that grenade damage will feed back some class ability energy. And then I also take impact induction so that powered melee damage will feed back into some more grenade energy. And as for the chest mods, just like for most builds, I'm running 3 resistance mods. I usually go for 2 elemental resistance and a concussive dampener. If you want a build to be viable in any endgame activity, 3 resistance mods are a must. Just make sure that you're matching them to the activity that you're running. And as for the leg mods, I'm taking innervation so that every time we pick up an orb, we gain back 10% grenade energy. Then I like to take 1 stasis and 1 arc weapon surge so that I can boost the damage from all of our weapons by 10%. And finally, for the class mods, I'm taking bomber so I can gain back a bit of grenade energy whenever we use our class ability. So I then pair that with reaper so that after we do use that class ability, our next weapon kill will create an orb. And finally, I bring powerful attraction. Now we collect any nearby orbs just by using that class ability. As for the artifact, I like to bring my grenade launcher perks like rapid impacts so that we gain increased reload speed for our grenade launchers just by dealing damage with them. You can also bring concussive reload since it will give you a way to easily weaken a boss, dealing 15% more damage just by using your grenade launcher on them. And you can top that all off with conductive cosmic crystal so that our arc moths will deal 5% more damage or 8% more damage when you boost it with a tonic. So taking a look at the weapons, in the kinetic slot, I like to bring a primary weapon, mainly a stasis weapon, so that we can build up our darkness meter faster. Make sure to match this with your heavy weapon so that you can get the most out of your weapon surge. I love pulse rifles, so the world drop Psi Hermetic is one of my favorites. It can roll with headstone for even more stasis synergy and AoE damage. Or you can bring this season's ritual weapon, Fair Judgment, which is an auto rifle that has Rhyme Stealer for more damage resistance, and either headstone or onslaught, depending on your personal preference. And for that energy slot, we're of course bringing Exterius, since it has the best synergy with this build. If you don't have access to this grenade launcher, then you could swap it out for a good special weapon like Buried Bloodline, Icebreaker, or even the Arcane Embrace Burst Shotgun. And as for the heavy weapon, Chill Inhibitor is the best option with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch. Bungie will be giving out a god roll for this weapon starting on November 19th. Simply go to Banshee and be sure to pick one up. Alternatively, this season's Bittersweet is also a good option since it has fantastic perks and is also arc so that you can double up on arc surge, leading to 15% more damage with both of your grenade launchers. This build is one of those fun builds that just feels so different from any other build out there. With the new and improved Void Overshield and buffs to Exterius, now is the time to give it a go. But remember, mastering this build is only the beginning. Experiment with different combinations and tweak your loadout to suit your playstyle. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed seeing a new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment down below on what you might change or how you'd improve the Mothkeepers Wraps Hunter build. Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.